How powerful was Darth Malak really? Greetings again, students of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. When discussing the events of the Jedi Civil War, all focus typically goes to Revan. After all, he was the Sith Lord who set the standard for the rule of two before that was ever established. He had a lot to live up to with Exar Kun having been his predecessor, and Revan did not disappoint. Revan managed to nearly bring the entirety of the Republic to its knees before he lost his memory. But today, we wanted to talk about the man responsible for Revan's memory loss in the first place, the man who carried on his campaign afterward with a new Sith Empire, the actual villain of Knights of the Old Republic, Darth Malak. Malak is often painfully overshadowed by his more successful colleague, and by other more accomplished Dark Lords, but we have to keep in mind that he was a real threat to the Jedi Order whenever he had control of the Starforge, and he nearly killed Revan in their final duel. But with that said, it's a little difficult to calculate just exactly where he stands with the rest of the roster and the Sith in the lore, mainly because most of Darth Malak's feats are listed when he was amped by the Starforge. But was Malak truly the unnotable man that history treats him as, or was he secretly a terrifying dark side powerhouse? Well, join us as we explore one of the most underrated Sith Lords in the Old Republic, and discuss just how powerful Darth Malak really was, whether he was over or underrated. The Starforge did great to amplify his natural powers, however it should be noted that it was a power increase, not necessarily power bestowal. What we mean is that Darth Malak didn't gain any new abilities when he was empowered by the ancient Rakatan superweapon, it simply boosted the powers that he already possessed. So luckily for us, all of the Force powers that he displays can be counted towards his own knowledge. It's simply the potency of this power that is being called into question. But let's begin this by starting at the beginning of the highlights of Malak's journey along with Revan. Originally, he was a Jedi Knight alongside Revan. At the time, he was called Alec. He ended up taking on the moniker of Malak at the same time that his friend decided to call himself Revan permanently. He was an excellent Jedi who was renowned for his combat ability. While Revan was more skilled in the realm of the Force, Malak had focused on honing his lightsaber skill, and was revered as one of the finest warriors of the Jedi Order. And together, the two of them were an unstoppable team whenever they put their skills together as one. Malak was headstrong, unwavering when he set his mind on a goal, and the way that he fought perfectly characterized this. Where Revan was more cunning and tactful, Malak preferred to bulldoze straight through his enemy, single-mindedly accomplishing any task he needed. This is also reflected in his own lightsaber style, which, like Revan, employed a mesh of maneuvers from many different lightsaber forms. During the war, Malak was described as brutishly smashing through all opposition, indicative of Form 5 Gem So. But watching him fight for ourselves, we see him utilize precise strokes to either break or to circumvent his enemy's guards, suggesting the use of Form 2 Makashi. But curiously, he has been shown to switch up this style, employing acrobatic strikes in order to quickly generate momentum to catch his opponent off guard, betraying the erratic philosophy of Form 7 Juyo. Nothing official about his form has ever been stated though, but we recognize a mixture, a deadly style that Malak had cultivated over long years of war. From what we've read in the Mandalorian war journals, there was no opponent that could stand on even ground with Malak, and the same was true for the Jedi Civil War, as he proved himself to be such a dangerous opponent that Jedi avoided getting near him. Bastila Shan, one of the Order's most capable Jedi, didn't last so much as a few minutes in the ring with Malak when she engaged with him. In fact, she went into the duel with a sacrificial mindset, knowing that she had no hope of possibly winning. She was just trying to get the currently amnesiac Revan to safety. However, during the Jedi Civil War, Malak did lose one duel, and that was of course to Revan himself. Apparently the two had a disagreement on their position as master and apprentice, and they had a brief duel that cost Malak his lower jaw, a constant reminder that he would always be beneath the power of Darth Revan. This was when Revan was at the height of his dark side power, which is what led Malak to realize that he could not betray his master at the blade, and he ended up ordering his capital ship to fire on Revans during one of their battles against the Republic, resulting in the Jedi managing to capture the Dark Lord and wipe his memory. But from that point forward, Malak would continue to grow in skill and power until he eclipsed that of his former friend and master. Or so he believed. Malak very rarely used Force abilities during combat, but he was adept at several maneuvers that made him a devastating close-range opponent. He had been known to utilize the Force to bolster his body's defenses, making him more of a tank than the average Force wielder. As a Jedi, he was once captured and tortured for weeks on end, and yet he called upon the Force to stave off the pain, to resist the interrogation. He did this in combat as well, shrugging off crippling blows in order to continue attacking the enemy. Malak was an exemplifier of offense being the best defense. He tried to mow down his enemies before they ever got the chance to attack, and if they did attack, he would use the Force to stave off the worst of his injuries. When he became a Sith Lord though, and studied magic with Revan, he would personally take the knowledge of dark healing to better increase this aspect of his style. At his peak in the Starforge, he was able to heal himself so rapidly that he was practically invulnerable. Other Force abilities he displayed were exceptionally strong, such as Force Lightning. He once killed a Jedi with a single blast of his lightning at full power. Even strong Sith usually take a few seconds to execute a target by Force Lightning. The semi-slow and painful death is the reason why they used the ability to begin with. But Malak just turned up the voltage and dropped the Jedi with a well-placed shock to their heart. He also showed an expertise in telekinesis. He frequently used Force Whirlwind, a way of creating a swirling wind current around a target to lift them up in the air and to spin them around. This was a useful technique to incapacitate enemies, and he regularly used it against the Jedi. He was also able to force choke 2 Jedi Masters simultaneously, and even walk away with them still in his grasp from a distance. And of course, he demonstrated the power of Force Freeze when he put both an amnesiac Revan and Bastila in a stasis hold. And although his lower jaw was removed, forcing him to speak through a vocabulator, he could still utilize Force Bellow. Channeling the Force through his voice, he sent out shockwaves with enough power to blast back groups of Force sensitives. And most important of all, he could actually tap into the dark side deeply enough to suppress the Force abilities of others, blocking them temporarily from using certain powers. This is notable because it is a feat that appears to be unique to Malak, as very few other Sith actually do this to their opponents until the time of Vitiate's Empire 300 years later. All of these things Malak did when he was away from the Starforge, which was a good indicator of his baseline ability and power. So all in all, Malak was a very sufficient threat, and definitely deserving of being the Dark Lord of this era. But even this era, he was overshadowed by Revan. Once the man redeemed himself and gained his memories back, Malak mentioned that he was even stronger than he was as a Sith Lord. And even then, he almost died when facing Malak on the Starforge. So just how much stronger did the Starforge actually make Malak? Revan always kept a limited contact with the Starforge, as he had found out what happened to the Rakata, and believed that the superweapon could be dangerous in large exposures. Malak, on the other hand, completely ignored this, and decided to delve himself as deeply as possible into the station. He believed that Revan only saw it as an infinite ship factory, and he saw it as so much more. Malak found out that the station was basically alive, and that it fed off of the dark side within other beings that were near it. In fact, it also inspired more of the dark side within them, giving power in return. Malak became obsessed with the Starforge, and meditated on it constantly, drawing out more and more new power. This was actually the side effect of gaining power from the Starforge. It dominated your mind, made you a slave to its will. Revan had enough wisdom to notice this. Malak did not. We aren't given any solid figures on how much the Starforge amped his power, but according to the lore, production of the Starforge was up to 300%, or a 3x boost. Since the Forge feeds Force users in the same general capacity that it feeds itself, we're going to make a loose assumption here and say that Malak was also buffed by 3 times his normal power when within the Starforge. And he further worked to increase his own abilities by attempting to drain the Force energy out of the Jedi prisoners that he kept there. According to the Star Wars RPG sourcebook, the amplification he got on the Starforge was sufficient enough to temporarily place him beyond the levels of Freed Nad and even Exar Kun. Here's the quote to substantiate this claim. He also wore a vocal mask that would have concealed a form of cybernetic life support. Did it provide him with powers far greater than even Exar Kun or Freed Nad? Or was his cybernetic enhancement too simple of an explanation? Some have misinterpreted this quote as asking whether or not the power was to surpass these 2 Sith Lords. The wording in the quote is a bit confusing, but with the last part of the sentence, was cybernetic enhancement too simple an explanation? This meant that it was really asking the question of what made him that powerful, not if he was that powerful. And the what in question is the Starforge. This is a hefty estimation, and one that is still being disputed to this very day among fans, but it's currently the only measurement of actual power that we have for Malak. His His presence within the Force was strong that it could be felt across the galaxy, drawing the Republic and Jedi forces to his location. And yet, after the Jedi prisoners were freed so that Malak could no longer feed on them, the redeemed Revan was still able to defeat his former friend in single combat. Again, we want to specify the idea that he could have been above the power of XR purely because of the boost of the Starforge and the imprisoned Jedi, but this does not include his baseline power and abilities. If we were to use our rough estimation that the Forge amped him by 300% the same way that he did for it, then we'd simply have to cut his potency down to a third of his peak in order to get his baseline power. Perhaps that means that Darth Malak without the Forge's involvement was around either a third or a half of Exar Kun's power. These figures of course are all based on our theory that the Starforge increased his power by the same level that he increased its production though, so we encourage you to take it with a grain of salt, and discuss your thoughts in the comments down below. But anyway my friends, Malak was a lot tougher of a Sith Lord to pin down exactly how powerful he was. A lot of his feats are not cut and dry, but this is what we believe is the actual power of Malak. He is one of the most difficult Sith to quantify when it comes to real true strength. But if we had to place Malak in the order of Sith Lords, we'd unfortunately probably place him in mid-tier. He displays impressive feats, but nothing that is unexpected of a Sith Master. It was perhaps the era that he was born in, which made him appear so threatening. This was a time in the galaxy when the Jedi Order was severely weakened after Exar Kun's own campaign. The Jedi's homeworld of Ossus had been destroyed by about 50 years before this, and they were also still suffering the consequences of the Mandalorian War, which had thinned their numbers a great deal. By the time Malak took over as a Sith, the Jedi Order's strength and emotional resolve was at an all-time low. A Dark Lord like Malak appeared unstoppable to this era's Jedi, but if he had existed around the time of the Great Galactic War, he wouldn't even be close to consideration for the Dark Council. But do you think we have it all wrong? We want to hear your thoughts on this one since the subject is so vague. We hope to see some scholarly debate in the comments down below on Malak's power and our estimation of it. And if there are any huge fans of Malak out there, definitely let us know why you love him so much. As always my friends, thank you so much for visiting the archives today, and may the Force be with you.